The MIT Enterprise Forum of Texas, in association with Houston Public Media, presents Shale Gas Fracking, Sustainable New Energy Paradigm? Brought to you by American Gas Association, committed to the safe delivery of clean natural gas to more than 65 million homes and businesses. Also sponsored by Oil and Gas Journal and Ensley Properties.
Our final presenter is David Neslin, former chairman of the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission.
Well, Colorado in many ways is a microcosm of what we've been talking about this evening. We're a major oil and gas producer, not the scale of Texas, but 47,000 active wells, about 3,000 new wells drilled each year, 5th in the country in natural gas production, 9th in oil production. But we're also an international outdoor destination, which prides itself on its national parks, world-class wildlife, ski mountains, hunting and fishing opportunities. 4 years ago, in response to a significant increase in unconventional oil and gas development across the state, we updated and comprehensively updated our regulatory program. And I just want to highlight 3 or 4 areas that we addressed that I think are instructive for the discussion this evening. First was responsibly regulating hydraulic fracturing. Now, the other speakers have explained why this is important and how critical this is to the development of these shale and other unconventional resources that we have. The first line of environmental defense is well integrity. Mark Bowling talked about this a little bit. It's important that that the wells be cased and cemented in a manner that's not only going to prevent any leakage of fracturing fluids during the hydraulic fracturing treatment itself, but also ensure that the oil and the gas that's being produced is not going to get into groundwater either. And so we added new requirements that operators submit cement bond logs to address the cement coverage at the well, and do Braden head testing during the hydraulic fracturing treatment, and report any significant changes in well pressures that might indicate a release of fluids below ground. We also added new chemical disclosure requirements. Now, this is important particularly as oil and gas development moves into some of these new areas closer to neighborhoods and people's homes. It's important that we gain public trust and public confidence. And so while, from my standpoint, chemical disclosure is not in fact critical to protecting the environment, I think it is critical to gaining public acceptance and public confidence. And so we require operators to disclose all of the hydraulic fracturing fluid ingredients and constituencies, and to post that information on a publicly available website. We also worked with the industry on a collaborative program to expand baseline groundwater sampling from specific areas to across the state. And this is important, again, picking up on something that I think Mark said earlier, so that we get away from perception and politic and have a body of data that we can rely upon when claims are made that groundwater has been contaminated, that we have pre-existing scientific data that we can look to and measure against. And then last, we went through what's called a Stronger review. Stronger is a great program comprised 1/3 of state regulators, 1/3 of industry representatives, 1/3 of environmental representatives. It's collaborative, it's solution-oriented, and it's timely, and it's designed to provide recommendations to particular state programs and how they can better improve their regulatory program in a manner that addresses both protection and efficiency. And this is not just Colorado. These are, I'm going to show you a series of slides here from Resources for the Future, a report that they issued earlier this summer, providing comparative information for different states on state casing and cementing programs, state fracturing fluid disclosure requirements. And this is really, I think, a great success story for state regulation. In the past 2 years, 16 states have adopted mandatory disclosure requirements for hydraulic fracturing. These states account for 92% of the drilling that is occurring in the country today. So the states have largely solved the disclosure issue in a very short period of time. And I think it shows how nimble and responsive state regulators can be. And another slide showing state groundwater testing programs and the proliferation of those programs across the country in connection with energy development. Couple of other areas to touch on quickly. Protecting groundwater. The state updated its pit lining requirements, encouraged the use of pitless drilling by operators. We increased our secondary containment requirements, again, to get at the issues that prior operators discussed or prior speakers discussed about potential spills at the surface and releases at the surface. We also added some new air quality requirements to try to get at the fugitive emission, methane emission issue. And so on a statewide basis, we require companies to use green completion practices where it's feasible to do so, to avoid or minimize methane releases and VOC releases. In the area of the state, northwestern Colorado, where we had most of the air quality and odor complaints from nearby landowners and residents, we added some new requirements after working with the industry to require emission control devices on certain types of production facilities where they were located within a quarter mile of a home or school, and to restrict the use of certain pits, again, when they're located within a quarter mile of a home or school. This is not a statewide requirement. It's targeted at particular areas that had odor issues and odor problems. And then the last issue I want to touch on is transparency, because I happen to think that the success of this industry requires public confidence, and public confidence in turn requires some level of transparency. And so we required all permit applications to be posted to the internet. We ensured that local governments and nearby surface owners received notice of permit applications. We provided an opportunity for public comment, and we're doing new things to try to coordinate with local governments and try to fold them into our process, the state process, to ensure that their issues are addressed in an efficient and effective manner. A couple of things I think have helped make these rules successful. They are not, it's not a one-size-fits-all. We tailored the rules to local basins, local landscapes, and local community needs because the issues differ across our state, and the issues are going to differ from state to state. There's no one solution that's going to work everywhere. We tried to strike a balance between performance and prescription. And I agree with Mike Watts, the last speaker. This is an incredibly innovative and dynamic industry. Great deal of technological innovation. And you just have to think about how this industry has evolved during the past decade, from vertical wells to directional wells on multi-well pads to now horizontal wells, all of which raise somewhat different issues. And so it's very important that the regulatory requirements allow for innovation, allow for alternative solutions, and not create narrow prescriptive requirements that become impediments to better balancing effectiveness and efficiency. And then last, it was very important that these changes be implemented responsibly, that companies have appropriate lead time to implement these kinds of changes, that the state provide appropriate training on what's being required, what's changing, and provide appropriate guidance on new issues or new questions that arise. To me, the implementation part of regulatory change is just as important as the regulatory changes themselves. We need to ensure that these changes are successful. Now, too often, I think, energy development and environmental protection are posed as irreconcilable alternatives. We can either develop the energy and despoil the environment, or we can protect the environment and forego the employment and economic benefits of the development itself. I think Colorado's experience is that we can do both. In the 3 years after we updated our regulations, we had more energy production. We experienced a 30% increase in oil production, a 10% increase in gas production, and we had more new well starts than any of the surrounding states, despite the economic downturn in 2008 and despite continued low natural gas prices. We've also achieved notable accomplishments in terms of environmental protection. So the use of pitless drilling systems more than doubled during this period. Activities earlier this summer, 61% of the fracturing fluid was being recycled. 85% of the fracturing treatments involved green completions. Well sites more than 1,000 feet from the closest building increased from 68 to 76%. And operators working with the state adopted 14 collaborative wildlife mitigation plans covering more than 750 square miles of habitat and allowing energy to be developed in those areas while providing additional protection for critical wildlife species. This is not just Colorado. States like Pennsylvania and Ohio have significantly updated their regulatory programs in the last year or so. Other states are working on updates today. And states can draw upon a wide array of regulatory benchmarks, models, and comparisons. Mark discussed the model draft regulatory program that Southwestern Energy, EDF, and others have worked upon. I mentioned Resources for the Future and their benchmark information, the Stronger process, University of Texas's report earlier this summer, various other benchmark and comparative information that help states do a better job. So at the end of the day, we're all energy consumers, we're all environmentalists, and I think the shale gas opportunities offer important benefits and opportunities for all of us, both as consumers and environmentalists. Thank you.